Hello and welcome. I'm Topher Field. This is the Topher Project. I help busy people like yourself to keep up with the world as it changes around you. And something that caught my attention was a press release coming out of a sitting member of the New South Wales Parliament calling for a remote part of inland New South Wales to be turned into the Las Vegas of Australia. And I thought, well, that is interesting. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Maybe what happens in Broken Hill stays in Broken Hill. It's an intriguing idea. I read through the press release and went, you know what? This might actually just work. So I have the man himself. It is John Ruddick, MLC, a New South Wales State MP. John, thank you so much for joining me.
Topher, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your interest.
What in the world would possess you to turn around and say, hey, let's turn a remote inland New South Wales town into Australia's Las Vegas? How is that even a sentence that you would put together?
Well, I grew up in rural New South Wales, and at the time of Federation in 1901, something like 70% of Australians lived outside of capital cities. And today it's the reverse. 70% of people live in the capital cities. Now, what is happening? And so if you go back to the 19th century and really up until sort of the second half of the 20th century, rural Australia was booming. And this is why you can go down our nice towns like Albury or Tamworth or Armidale or Port Macquarie, and the buildings are quite grand.
Yeah.
But what's been happening is the life is being sucked out of them. Now, Broken Hill is a very iconic Australian town. That's where BHP started. And BHP has delivered rivers of gold, to Australia and to the good old government, through a million taxes. It's now the biggest mining company in the world, but there's still mining going on at Broken Hill, but the ore bodies are, they are, wearing out. And Broken Hill has got really flash old buildings, from the 1800s, but it's in a steady decline, like many parts of rural Australia. So when Javier Milei got elected in Argentina, a lot of people said, this is a radical experiment. Who knows how it's going to unfold? Radical libertarianism. All the libertarians around the world sat back and said, it'll work. It's impossible not to work. If you have a group of humans and you give them freedom, they'll be busy, they'll be innovative, they'll be dynamic, they'll be prosperous, they'll do things. Now, all we're saying, this is not going to cost any government money, Topher. What we're saying is in Broken Hill, let's make it start off with a regulation-free local council area. So that means no stamp, we remove stamp duty, remove payroll tax, encourage businesses, remove casino licenses, and in all these entertainment precincts, because Las Vegas is gambling, but it's also magnificent shows. Elvis Presley was there for about 3 years. He didn't leave Las Vegas. And look, there's always the world's biggest acts are in Las Vegas. There's amusement centers, sort of like Luna Park, Disneyland type things.
There's a Grand Prix in Las Vegas.
It's everything now. And if you've been to Las Vegas, it's the desert. It is a barren landscape. And capitalist initiative has turned it into, a unique part of America and indeed the world. Now, Broken Hill, firstly, it's iconic. Secondly, there's a lot of good old, beautiful old buildings there that we can, renovate. Thirdly, if you look at the map of Australia, Broken Hill is sort of equidistant from the major capital centres. It's about 2 hours from Perth, 2 hours from Sydney, an hour and a half from Melbourne. It's not that far from Singapore. Okay?
By plane, you mean? By plane.
Correct, by plane, yes.
Yeah.
And so if there's, in Las Vegas, they've got these beautiful hotels, and guess what? They're very cheap. It's not like getting, if you go down to the Ritz-Carlton down in Sydney, what is it, $500-600 a night? Well, in Las Vegas, it's about $130 a night. So it's why is that? Because the land is cheap. Okay, so I'm thinking, let's show the world, let's show Australia, let's show New South Wales how great a little town can become if we get the government out of the way.
Well, the biggest danger I see here with this is that if this experiment actually worked, then Australians might start to call for similar deregulation reforms Australia-wide, which would be a good thing for Australians, but surely a terrible thing for the major parties. Now, you're not a part of a major party, you're one of the minor ones. Do you really think that they'd be willing to take a risk on this actually working?
Well, okay, you are right. Okay, that if it really booms in Broken Hill, let's make special economic zones all over the place. Okay, and some might want to specialize in Bitcoin or technology or whatever, be a little hub. but get the government off their back and let the locals say that we want to have measures here to encourage a particular industry. So
Yeah.
that would be the first thing. Now, then you're also correct that, yes, the government's going to be thinking, gee, if we loosen our control over that little part, then our control will be loosened over that as well. I got a feeling they're not that bright, okay? So they'll think, look, what's the harm in, Broken Hill being a trial experiment here? And look, I'm hoping to be out of Broken Hill, soonish, and we'll have a discussion with the locals and see what they think.
Well, my mind immediately, when I read your press release, my mind immediately went to Hong Kong, because people would look at Broken Hill and say, well, what's there? Surely this could never work. It's not Las Vegas. Obviously, it doesn't have the population. It doesn't have the strip and the hotels and the casinos and the big show business, etc. There's nothing there. But I'm going to bring up a photo here of the before and after of Hong Kong, the top, of course, being the before. And relatively speaking, there was nothing there when it actually, in fact, that photo at the top there was not actually, that is after it was largely deregulated. It was just fishing villages and fishing shacks, mostly primary production and fish was really what Hong Kong was, until it became in a global sense, it became a special economic zone, and people and capital and businesses poured in, and the bottom is the result, the Hong Kong that we know today. So do you really believe that something like this could work in a world where companies are, for example, setting up headquarters in places like Ireland? American tech companies are headquartered in Ireland because of their tax policies. Global banking conglomerates are headquartered in Hong Kong because of their business-friendly and taxation policies. Could we really see global conglomerates actually headquartering themselves in a place like Broken Hill simply because of the favorable tax treatment that they could get there?
Well, look, we'd have to start off with relaxing the regulations first.
Sure.
Then if it sort of takes off, we can then look at, yes, not paying taxes. Okay, well, we can certainly remove things like at the state level, things like payroll tax and
Sure.
stamp duty and land tax.
Yeah.
But then look, if it starts to really get legs, then we can make it even better by asking the federal government, give us, Broken Hill would have to say, look, we will, if we're not paying tax, then we're going to have to fund some of our own services. Okay,
Sure.
well, they're not going to want to do that unless it's a success. But look,
Yep.
if let's say you've got $1 billion and you want to invest in a casino in Australia, now you're going to think about going to Melbourne or Sydney. The land is a massive part of the cost. Okay, then there's stamp duty on top of that. Okay, so Broken Hill land is cheap. Okay, because there's a ton of it. And this is what made Las Vegas great.
Yeah.
Las Vegas 100 years ago was just like Broken Hill today. Okay, and so look, I'm confident. I'm confident that if we get the government out of the way and we have people can, the very pro can-do business attitude, I think we can really make it an example of how we can revive not just Broken Hill, we can revive all of rural Australia
Yeah.
by reducing the size of the government.
This actually isn't the first time I've come across the proposal for special economic zones within Australia. The first time I came across it personally was after the 2019-20 bushfires. I did a road trip with my wife and family to go into some of these communities and spend some money and help to get their local economies back on their feet. We spent a week on the road and drove along sort of across Victoria and turned the corner and went up the southern coast of New South Wales. And we got to an area called Mogo, and I met with a woman there. I actually stayed in her house. She was a wonderfully hospitable lady. Sadly passed away now, but she was advocating for special economic zones in the bushfire affected areas to specifically stimulate economic activity and to help them get back on their feet. You're right to mention Javier Milei in Argentina. He's basically, in a way, he's turning the country into a bit of a special economic zone in a sense. Ireland, I mentioned already. Hong Kong, I mentioned already. These are places that really are proof of concept here. What would have to happen? I mean, is this going to require legislation within the New South Wales Parliament? Is this something that could just be done within the Broken Hill Council if the locals really got behind it? Is this something they could actually take the lead on? How would we get from where we are to the first steps? I appreciate it needs to happen in stages. We need to be steady about this. We need to win public support. But could we get to the first stage politically, realistically, without the support of, or without involving the federal government, for example?
Well, I'm hoping to move a bill later this year in the New South Wales Parliament to propose a special economic zone in Broken Hill. Okay, now, but that would initially be calling for liberalising things at the regulatory level, so we
Sure.
don't need to pass legislation on that. Now, then, if that goes well, we can then say, okay, well, in Broken Hill, there's no stamp duty on purchases. There's no payroll tax on payrolls. There's no land tax, and we liberalise a lot of other. I think we should, you've got to have a license to become a hairdresser. Okay, in New South Wales, we just liberalise the whole lot. Okay, so and now then we would need to. If we really wanted to make it a Hong Kong, we would need the cooperation of the federal government.
Sure.
Okay, that is true. Okay, but Topher, we're hoping the Libertarian Party forms federal government in a federal election or two. So, we can only just sort of keep promoting good ideas and keep winning the hearts and minds of people.
One step at a time. Look, it's a fascinating concept. It's an attention-grabbing concept, but it is not actually fantasy. We've seen examples of this around the world where this can and does work. If only we would embrace such a thing. I applaud you for putting it forward. I think it's bold. I hope you get some traction with it, and I certainly thank you for coming on to the Topher project.
Terrific. Thanks, Topher.
Cheers.